Thank you, Daniel. Thanks for coming on the podcast again.
Of course, man.
Always,
Happy to be here.
Yeah,
Second
dude.
time.
I know. And it's good to have you back. And you have since changed locations, so we're not working together anymore. But we still are making time to be able to see each other. So that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that we were kind of talking about before was like, we were talking about a bunch of different things before.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to pick like one particular thing.
We have very diverse conversations.
But I was recently listening to our old episode because I kind of wanted to like prepare to think about, well, what have we already covered so we don't like completely retread the same ground. But one of the things that at the time I had not learned anything of was Michael Pollan's book.
Yeah.
And I've not finished the book because I've since got sidetracked with Fire Emblem, which if anybody's played Fire Emblem Three Houses, you know how addicting that game is. But I've gotten to like kind of like the last part of that book. I think I'm on like the last third or quarter of the book. And you talked a lot about Michael Pollan's book and like the effect it had on you that made you willing to try psychedelics.
Yeah, dude, totally broke the stigma.
Yeah. Totally. And I think it did too, like from my perspective of reading it as somebody who's already bought into it, already bought into the brand and everything.
Yeah.
I really liked that he was so measured in such a way that I don't think anybody could possibly say this dude's a zealot for this.
You know, he's a great writer too.
He's a great writer. You know, the structure, the form, it was entertaining and engaging. He would not talk about any one thing for too long before you would be able to start moving into another direction, and he would cover a different topic. So all in all, I really liked that book a lot, and I feel like now I have a greater context for what you were talking about listening to it back the other day.
Sure.
So,
and he's kind of, I think we're going to look back on him and see that he was the one that kind of brought it back into the mainstream in this day and age. Because he like I remember him, I don't remember which video it was, but he said it's so cool to like go out into public and have conversations about this and draw a crowd that isn't just psychonauts. Like people are actually listening.
Yes.
Like people in the mental health field and like just normal people who are like fans of his or like, you know, all that. But
totally. You know, he actually came to Chicago recently.
Yeah. I did. I saw that.
Maybe it was like 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, something like that. And Joey's girlfriend, Sarah, she's like in the psychology field, and that's what she's
I was a psych
in school
minor.
for. Yeah. So she actually went and saw that. And she said, so this is somebody who Joey and I have been preaching to her about psychedelics. And she like, you know, it's not that she didn't believe us, but she just is like, man, we'll see. We'll see if it does all those things you guys say. But then when she went and saw him speak and a bunch of other people in the psych field, so he's literally on a tour with other like psychology, like leads in the psychology world, talking about these things and talking about how effective they are. And it was really cool to see how he had changed her mind.
Yay.
He did. He changed her mind. And
Nice.
she definitely like seemed more excited about the prospect of using that in her career moving forward, being in psychology or, you know, being a psychiatrist.
Yeah, dude. It's going to be a big part of it, I think.
It's going to be a huge part of it. I think you're more likely to see success in that field than you are in just like recreational use of the shit, you know?
Right. Because like in a professional setting, and I think all of the ones he did and the ones that he talked about are in a professional clinical setting where you have the right set and setting, you have all the necessary precautions to make sure that you don't spiral or have like a bad trip. There's somebody there, like, it's going to be huge.
It's going to be huge. It's going to be totally huge. I thought it was really interesting how he like was seeking out different guides throughout the book. Yeah,
and some of them
like
were
some of them he was like, nope.
Yeah, he was like a Lithuanian or like Romanian dude, and he was treading lightly on it because he was kind of nervous about like, you know, fucking with his mind. He didn't want to like, he's like, my mind's the only thing connecting me to reality. And he asked the guy, what happens if I die? And the guy was like, well, we'll just bury you.
Yeah.
He was like, okay, I'm going to try and find somebody else.
He's like, let me find someone else.
Because he was obviously joking.
He was joking. And he was also saying it because I think he never thought that was a real threat.
Yeah.
You know, but from what Michael Pollan talks about in that book is that he's got like a heart condition or like, a heart
Yeah.
arrhythmia or something where it's like irregular heartbeats.
Yeah.
So he had a legitimate side thing that's completely unrelated to the psychedelic that could have been a challenge for him in
Yeah.
that state. And it does elevate your heart rate. And
It does.
I know you and I have talked about microdosing.
Yeah.
On how
I've heard that can elevate your heart rate.
on how
You
it
do it a
does.
lot.
It does elevate your heart rate. And so there, like anything in moderation.
Mm-hmm.
Have you experimented with microdosing at all?
Not really. The one time I told you about this, the one time that I tried to do it, it wasn't so great.
It wasn't good. And
Yeah.
you haven't done it since?
No, I mean, like, it's not that I'm opposed to doing it, but I feel like I get a lot more out of like macro doses every once in a while.
Sure.
So I would
Sure.
I would definitely try it again, and I would definitely try it. I did mushrooms the one time.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember at the time I was working in a like very customer facing environment.
Yes.
So I remember on the come up was like at a morning meeting, and I kind of like started to get anxious a little bit
Yeah.
and self-conscious and all of that. And then like the first person I talked to was like this angry woman, and I was just like, oh my God.
You're like, oh God, this is not a good start.
Yeah, yeah.
This
And then
is
it
tanking fast.
eventually kind of like leveled out and tapered off. And I was just kind of like, I remember just being kind of in my own head that whole
Yeah.
day. And
Yeah.
it wasn't, in retrospect, it was not good set and setting for me.
No, not
because
for your
I was
first
not
time.
very like, I still think I'm not that experienced of a psychonaut. I mean, I remember the last time I came on in, what was it, February?
I think it was
I had
February,
only
March,
really
yeah.
done one.
Mm-hmm.
And since then I've done probably like 3 or 4, if we count the microdose, like 5. And then
Mhm.
me and you did acid that one time.
Yeah.
The last time I was in this room,
Allegedly.
I was on.
Allegedly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's actually talk about that for a second.
Mhm.
How was that acid trip for you?
It was cool. It was so I definitely had, I mean, you were obviously a really great shaman for me.
Thank you.
So you set the right expectations, I think. So
Mm-hmm.
I definitely see for sure in retrospect that they're very similar and very different.
Mm-hmm.
LSD, you have a lot more control over the whole experience.
Mm-hmm.
So like once the egocentricity and the layers of self-concern have been lifted, you can kind of go wherever you want. You can think about whatever you want. You have like total control over it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with mushrooms, you're more on a journey.
And it's steering
it's
you.
more full body, and LSD is more just in your head.
Mm-hmm.
Mushrooms is more full body, and it can go like really like dark and serious, and it can kind of come back. You don't really have much control over what comes up, and it's usually like the energy is it's more, I don't know if this is 100% accurate, but I would say like the energy of mushrooms is more feminine and healing,
Mm-hmm.
and LSD is more masculine and logical.
Okay. That's an interesting way to phrase it.
Yeah.
I've always said that mushrooms is more spiritual.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, definitely
and
that too.
empathetic. And I feel like you can almost like feel the pain of other people, or you can feel the love of other people, in the inverse of it. Whereas acid or LSD, whatever you want to call it, for me has always been, analytical, logical.
Yeah.
Like I can break down something to the fundamental level of, well, like this activity, let's say playing tennis. I could like break it down to the fundamentals of like, well, ultimately this is me taking my momentum of my body and shifting it, using this racket as my extension of myself, and driving that force through the ball. And it's really important for me to focus on where my feet are so that my arm is not the thing doing all the work, and it's using my core, and I could think about it on like all the way down to like the fucking strand of DNA, like it allows you to go completely infinitely in both directions.
Also, it seems more recreational to me.
Yeah. I mean, I
definitely take these compounds seriously. I mean, it just seemed a lot more like you have less of it. Like the therapy of psilocybin or magic mushrooms is like, I remember especially the first time I felt like I had gotten like 5 years of psychotherapy in like 6 hours. I just fucking cried it all out.
Oh yeah. The cathartic release is real. I've had that on acid.
Yeah.
But it comes more naturally on mushrooms to have that kind of cathartic release, to have that just like emotional engagement. Whereas I feel like acid gives you this ability to almost like analyze something from a totally different frame of mind and you can think about it completely logically and almost emotionally detached from some of those like things that maybe were like
That's
energetic.
really interesting. I could definitely see that.
Yeah, but I mean, I think you can also go the other way. I think you can be very empathetic too, and you can really place yourself in somebody else's shoes.
But like logically empathetic.
You can be
feeling the empathy, feeling what other people are feeling.
And I mean, I think you can feel what other people are feeling on some level. Like, I don't want to like take that power away from LSD because I do think it has that. Yeah. But it's, to me, is like I can logically break down maybe why something didn't work right in a relationship, or why something, you know, might not have played out the way that it was supposed to between people or a situation or something. And I feel like I can break it down a little more objectively without being super emotionally attached to, well, you know, whatever personal involvement I have in that situation. Yeah. So I feel like it gives you that same way that meditation gives you that critical distance from your mind. Yeah. I think acid gives you that too.
Yeah, I definitely had that more of that feeling on LSD, because it's kind of like all of the egocentricities and like the layers of self-concern were dissolved
completely.
But it wasn't like, the only way I can describe it is you just have more control over it.
You do.
Yeah.
And you almost, to me, it's almost like, and I think the thing that I found with acid is like it helped me unlock my own mind. Mm-hmm. You know, it helped me realize like how I can manipulate my mind and make it work for me, and what things were actively working against me based on previous patterns of thought or other, you know, feedback loops that I might have found myself in. Yeah. And I feel like acid allows you to kind of like assess those feedback loops. And if they're beneficial to you, then then keep doing them. Yeah. But if they're not, then you can kind of be like, I can see the loop that I'm finding myself in. That's not good. And you don't have like any personal like, I'm so stupid, or like, no, you're just like,
That's the benefit, dude, because you don't have that self-critical voice talking to you on either one. And then like hours and hours of meditation just like slowly chips away at that to where you start making enough progress to where you can kind of really get distance from it and control it. But I think that one of the major differences between meditation and psychedelics for me is like, meditation is you're kind of just viewing all of the contents of consciousness. You're basically just watching your mind and your everything happen, like, and then slowly you start getting more distance from it. You're seeing all of the contents as they are and building a different relationship with them. Whereas on psychedelics, it's like, and this is partially, or not partially, it's totally a good thing. All of the contents of consciousness get so radically altered that it almost like forces you to think differently. It forces you into that frame of mind.
You can't think back the way that you thought before because you're seeing something from a view that you can no longer unsee. Yeah. Yeah. It literally forces you to see it like, I was looking at it from this angle, but honestly, this other angle is totally valid and maybe is even more true than the angle that I was previously looking at.
And it definitely gets you out of like if you have like really rigid compulsive thinking about something, I mean, meditation will help, but psychedelics like literally force you out of that and force you to see it differently.
It really does.
Yeah.
I watched a Psych Substance video recently.
I watched them.
And shout out to Psych Substance, because he's one of the few people that's, you know, been paving the way for these type of conversations to happen on YouTube, which is, you know, getting constantly demonetized. So, but one of the things that he was saying was that he had like a major epiphany. And it was one that I think you and I both kind of like thought about, but I feel like it clicked more with me when I watched that video, that I was like,
which video
I should be mindful of that. So he talked, this is actually a fairly recent video. I want to say he released in the last couple of weeks. And he talked about how, you know, he used to think that if just people just had the same kind of experience that I had, which woke me up, you know, then anyone can. And I think he's starting to realize that, no.
Really?
I don't, and I kind of agree with him. I'm like, I don't think that just anybody can just wake up. I think people could just do acid and not fucking learn a thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I've asked you about that too.
Yes.
Like, what do you make of the people who just don't
miss the point?
Miss it. They just don't get it. Because I've seen it. I'm like, how? Like, especially of my own experience. I'm like, how can you miss this?
It seemed like it was the whole experience. But the thing is that you don't realize all of the things in your life that allowed you to be able to see that point of view. Yeah. That naturally were just part of how you've already grown up. or like situations that you found yourself in, and other things that make you, that made you more capable of seeing that awakening in yourself.
Yeah.
Whereas there are other people who like, they don't have any of that supporting shit. So then when they do the drug, they're just like, oh, this is fun.
Yeah.
Look at how the wall moves. And then that's it.
That's it.
And I'm really starting to realize that, like, what I like about this podcast is we get to talk about these things honestly. And for the people who are going to wake up, they totally can get the information that they need to be responsible and take that journey for themselves.
Yeah.
And hopefully test your drugs and all that other stuff that I like to talk about.
Yeah.
But like, it's not guaranteeing that these people are going to wake up,
right.
you know? And it's made me realize that like the epiphanies that I've had, and I had them early on in my experience. It really only took a couple trips for me to really like get kind of this major shift that completely fundamentally changed my life. But I've had other friends who I've given, you know, not directly, allegedly, but that I've like facilitated the experience for them, right? And some of them also had that waking up moment. And some of them still haven't had it yet. And it's not that they're not capable, just that they just didn't have it in the times that they did it. Yeah. And it made me realize that like there's no guarantee that you get that experience at all.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is setting an intention and like putting yourself into an environment where you can like really let it speak to you.
Yes.
And like just being conscious of everything that's happening. So I think if you just, you know, take a handful of mushrooms and go to a concert, you're not going to get a lot of, you'll probably see some cool stuff, but you're not going to notice the stuff that really needs to like.
So do you think that there's a minimum level of conscious awareness that you need in order to wake up? Or do you think that doesn't matter and there's some other variable that causes people to either wake up or not wake up?
That's an awesome question. I think it's hard to say because I've always been a super introspective person. I think that there has to be some kind of like introspection. Yeah,
there's got to be a desire to look inward.
Yeah.
You can't have no desire to look inward or be alone with your thoughts at all, and then you trip, and then all of a sudden you figure it all out. Like no, because I feel like your ego, which is still somewhat present on the experience, especially depending on the dosage.
Depending on how much you take, right?
Depending on the dosage. But let's say you didn't take enough to have an ego death or anything like that. Some of that is going to cling to some of the old things.
Yeah.
And it might be, if your consciousness isn't raised high enough, might not be powerful enough to overpower, you know, or to not overpower the psychedelic or to.
I remember getting to the point where like the first trip that I did, I was like literally felt like I was outside of myself, and I would see my brain go through the normal pattern.
I was gonna say, you got more than one brain,
dude? I got 3 brains, dude.
Holy shit,
3 brains.
Next level.
I was watching. I literally felt like I was watching my mind go from like a third person perspective. It felt like, and it's just like, what the fuck are you doing? Why are you so mean to yourself?
Yeah.
Like those kinds of insights.
Like the self-talk.
Yeah. So like, and just realizing that I have like a lot more anxiety than I let people do. And it was all just like stuff that I knew deep down about myself, but just to get that, and I had gotten a lot of perspective from it from meditation, and still do. But like, it was kind of like you get for a few hours the feeling of what it's like to be enlightened. Like truly enlightened in like the realest sense of the word.
Yes, but it's temporary.
It is temporary.
And in order to make it permanent, then you need to have those integrated experiences where you really find a way to incorporate that perspective in a day-to-day basis. Yeah. Because that magic will fade. Yeah. And what I've found, and this is something that I discovered on that heroic dose that I took somewhat recently, where I want to achieve these states without psychedelics. I do. I really do. I still enjoy them, you know. Like, I'm really glad I tripped in Colorado. It's amazing, you know. But that was a more recreational thing. I wasn't, like, looking... I'm at the point now in my life where I just don't think I have that much that I need to find out.
I was going to say that exact same thing. Like, maybe that's just become more of your natural state now.
I think it is, because I'm at the point now where, like, I know that I value my time, and I know that I want to spend it how I want to spend it, and I know what's important to me, and like, I don't feel like I need some big revelation on life itself. I kind of know what my purpose is. I kind of know what I want to overall accomplish. So, like, for me, the psychedelic experience now is like to maybe check on myself, because, momentum is a real thing, and you can get caught up in the momentum of some shit, even if there's some good things in that momentum that you still might every once in a while need to stop and like figure out like, well, where am I at, and I think that that's what that last trip was, whereas like I wasn't looking for like a major revelation because I'm already kind of on the right path in terms of where I want to go. But what I did want to do is figure out, why am I not fully achieving where I want to be?
Yeah. They could be really useful tools for that.
Yeah.
Just to get like all of your bullshit out of the way and really look at something.
Yeah. And I think there's a great deal of work on the front end of the psychedelic experience, which is like, how can I work through all of my past trauma and get to the point where I'm caught up to the present?
Yeah.
Because we are constantly battling demons of our past all the time. Mm-hmm. Everybody is. Yeah. Imprints that happen in pivotal moments in your life as like a young child or in adolescence or teenage years, whatever. Certain moments that you just remember. It's burned into your brain. Shit that you're like, never going to do that again because of that, even though that might not even be the right conclusion, right? And you have to work through those things. And I feel like I've worked through quite a bit of those things. To the point where I feel like I've caught up to the present. I could be wrong. There could be some shit in the past that I've suppressed that I am not aware of, that might come up in the future and future trips at the right moment when I'm ready to see it. But as of right now, from my perspective, I've dealt with those things. Mm-hmm. And I'm at the point now where I just have to deal with what's in front of me, which is awesome. And that's powerful. That's freeing. That's something that I hope everybody can find. Yeah, because
that's like the present moment is all you have.
It's all you got.
It's all you will.
And so if you're still clinging to the fucking past in some way,
past and future are just ideas. Mm-hmm. And that sounds like woo woo, but it's like it's true.
Break it down for me, Daniel. Break it down for me. Let's solidify that for somebody who maybe they see that as like, what does that even mean, dude? Yeah, listen, you're speaking to a skeptic now. So what would you say to a skeptic of like, but like the past was real when it was present and the future will be real when it becomes the present. So why can't I think about those things?
Yeah, but like the past and future are really just, so the future is anticipatory and the past is just a memory. Mm-hmm. They're just thoughts that are occurring in the present. Mm-hmm. And once you establish the muscle of mindfulness and meditation, you start to see that thoughts are really just like transitory, impermanent appearances in consciousness in the present moment. So consciousness is, I would say all you really have experientially is consciousness and its contents. That's the only thing that's really, really real. Mm-hmm. I mean, the self, debatable. I don't seem to think that it's real, like in a really real sense. It's real insofar as it's useful to you. Mm-hmm. Free will we can talk about. That's like kind of the same idea.
We're starting to get there already.
It's a little more controversial, but but like all of that stuff is just other thoughts that are just occurring in the present. So, and I would say that like thinking is something that really just happens to you. It's not something that you really do. Mm-hmm. So like you're more
something the brain does,
right?
But not
you don't really.
You don't control the brain's thoughts any more than you control the blood pumping.
Right. So you don't control the events that happen in your prefrontal cortex that lead to the decisions that you make, really.
Okay.
What do you think about that?
I'm going to push back on that a little bit.
No, I'm totally open to it.
Yeah.
I mean, let me actually, before you do that. So if we're going to get into free will, the basic, and this is something that I'm still kind of hashing out, but it's something that I think it's definitely going that way for me, philosophically. So the logic breakdown is this, and this is kind of like a version of like the Sam Harris brand of no free will.
Sure, I know.
So I don't want to take credit for this completely, but basically the logic goes like this: you don't pick your parents, you don't pick your genetic makeup of your mind, you don't pick the genetic makeup of your body. You don't pick you don't pick the environment that you grow up in or the stuff that you're exposed to that leads to those, like you said, like the past events that lead to the present.
Sure.
And then the kind of the fourth premise is usually where people start losing it. But I think people who are mindful and do meditation, like I feel like you would get this. Like once you get enough mindfulness and you see the present moment, you don't really control your thoughts or intentions either.
Okay. So I'm going to push back on that a little bit.
Yeah, go.
I agree with you that we don't choose the thoughts that come out per se. But I do believe that there is something to your decision making that is inherently you. Meaning that all the things that happen to you are going to shape the decisions you make. If you were bit by a dog, when you approach a dog, you're going to be hesitant. That doesn't mean it's a conscious thought, but it still is kind of like part of your personality because of that shaping moment in your life, right?
Right, but you can't account for why that's a part of your personality and not something else.
Well, so from my perspective, all of the decision trees that I might go down are going to come from a certain frame of possibilities that only I will have. Right? Like, for whatever reason, based on my personality traits and all that other stuff, there's only going to be so many decisions I'm going to make given a certain situation. Yeah. Where there's only this possibility, or this possibility. Yeah. I'm not going to think like, because I'm not a murderer, I'm not going to jump to, oh, I should kill that guy. You know what I mean? Like, so there's certain things that are just completely just not part of your thought process at all. And that's kind of inherently you. Now, the decision between two completely different choices in a given circumstance to go left or to go right, that decision is going to come down to a bunch of unconscious processing that then you will arrive on a particular direction based on that. But I would argue that unconscious processing is still, you don't have to be conscious for it to still be you, to still be your decision. And I don't think that just because an unconscious part of myself decided to kind of pull the trigger on a particular decision, I don't believe that means that I had no control over it, because the odds are is that unconscious processing and that unconscious perspective was shaped by experiences I've had in the past that make me a certain way. So I would argue that is a level of control, and I know that you would argue the opposite, given the exact same circumstances.
So honestly, I feel like we're kind of saying the same thing.
We probably are, but my I guess like point is that I believe that is control, even though it's not traditional control.
So I would say that it's kind of, so let me maybe preface this, and this is again not something that I've 100% bought into. It's just something that seems a little more likely than not at this point. But so it's kind of like the illusion of the self. It is real insofar as it's useful to you. I'm not going to deny that it's useful to think and act as if you have free will. I think that is good for people. I think that is generally good for society. The utilitarian in me definitely thinks that that's a good thing. But basically, and I think you just kind of said this, like you can choose what you decide to do, but you cannot decide what you decide to do. Like your brain is always just like making complex reasoning and decisions based on past experiences, based on your genetic makeup, based on your neurology. And you're more the conscious witness of that than you are the controller of it. It's like so you're like a storm of all of these like existential things, like consciousness and its contents, the mind, seeing, hearing, all of that stuff. But you don't create the storm. You're not lost in the storm. You are the storm.
Sure. And I don't disagree with that at all. I guess for me, it's a framing, and maybe this is just my own misinterpretation of the framing, but the framing of that determinism is like that there's some fucking author writing this shit. Not literally, but like meaning that there's some author writing all the decisions and you had no control over any of them. You know what I mean? And I don't think it's that way. I think it's more likely that there's a certain range of acceptable possibilities.
Yeah, so I think this brand of it is called compatibilism. So this is saying that the truth of determinism or unconscious thought, environment, all of that is compatible with libertarian free will, or at least the idea of it. So like your brain creates the choices that you would make in any given. So it's basically like a game of chess. Yeah. Like your brain has created all of the degrees of freedom, and then you have degrees of freedom to move within those bounds.
That. Yes. Right. So that is probably, I mean, I don't know anything about compatibilism.
But I feel like when you really parse that apart, it's still determinism.
I don't know, because then you start getting into
that. The counter decisions are also made by unconscious processes. Like if you have a decision between left and right, and based on how you're feeling that day, based on all of the pros and cons of the situation, you choose left a little bit more than right. I don't think that when you really break that down, it's kind of the same thing.
Well, I think the hardest part about defining it is like, if there's no you, aka the self's an illusion, then who is making the decision? You know what I mean? And I think that's a fair question to ask.
Universe.
Yeah. Well, and you could make that argument that it's the universe itself, which is all that there is and is making all decisions. Everything that happens within this self-contained universe, or not self-contained, could be fucking infinite, is all being decided by the laws of physics and all these other things. You know, you could definitely make that argument. I guess for me, determinism sounds a lot like somebody who's a materialist who isn't factoring in the whole equation. So who's I just want to calculate what I can see in front of me and measure, you know? I think that's a limited way of viewing it and not seeing the larger picture.
Yeah. So I think that I definitely don't identify as a materialist, and I definitely don't identify.
Yeah, and I don't think you do.
So I don't identify as an atheist. I don't identify as a materialist for sure. Like definitely meditation and psychedelics snapped me out of that really quickly. Oh, yeah. Like I don't understand so much of like the universe and life and all of that stuff. But I'm only speaking experientially. And I don't think that like having faith or having a religion changes that very much, because I think, there's a sect of Christianity called Calvinism that basically thinks they figured that out and think that's the same thing. And so the way that they've rationalized it is if they had people are born damned or people are born saved. And that's just the way it is.
Damn. See that no pun intended, but like that to me is like, if that's your version of God, then you have somebody who was born fucked.
I know. Yeah. It doesn't
you know
really
I mean? Like, are you cool with a God that'll do that?
Yeah.
I don't know. And that's where like religion will always lose me, even though I definitely am like a spiritual being where I certainly, believe in a higher power, but not in your conventional sense, more in that the higher power is all that there is. The universe is the higher power, the existence of all these things and the force that drives everything through it. The force, you could fucking literally relate it to Star Wars. It's kind of like that. It is, in my opinion. And I think that's why Star Wars resonates so deeply with people, is it's a classic hero's journey. So Joseph Campbell's, hero's journey. Yeah. But then it also has this like magical force that we kind of all acknowledge exists in this universe in some way. And if you really think about it and look at it, there's so many situations that you've run into that, if you're a materialist, you just chalk it up to coincidence after coincidence after coincidence. But, at a certain point, it's like, how many coincidences do you need to have before you start realizing nothing's a coincidence and that everything is exactly as it's supposed to be?
Yeah. Yeah. So so I definitely think that as well. Like, I think that everything is exactly the way that it's supposed to be. You as a human wanting the present moment or whatever it is to be different is just the wellspring of suffering.
Dude, and have you seen Westworld?
I've seen the first season.
Okay.
I haven't seen season 2.
So I think this is a quote from the first season. Yeah. And it's Anthony Hopkins, aka Dr. Ford. And he says to Bernard, wishing the world to be something it isn't is like the root of all suffering or something like that. I can't remember exactly the quote,
totally
but it was totally in that. It was like wishing something is the way you want it to be, but it isn't is, like that's fucking life, dude. Yeah. And it really totally is
true. I mean, even with the perspective of other people, like they have a past, they probably have a battle that you know nothing about. They have their own genetic makeup. They have their own thing going on. Like everything, it's just everything just is what it is. Yeah. And you can't, and then like, situations happen, the laws of nature, like all of that stuff. It's all natural. Everything is natural. Everything.
It is. Even the things that people think aren't natural, that's natural. It's natural that we created these technological things because that we are a technology species. Yeah. That's what we've done our whole existence. The technology is certainly advanced, but the premise of just making technology has not changed at all. The same way that, bees make hives and they make honey and they pollinate. It's just what they do.
Yeah. That's what they're programmed to do by years and years and years of evolution.
Exactly. Like and, finding the energy. Everything is finding energy and trying to repurpose it and use it, you know? So any crevice on this planet where there's energy that isn't being stolen in some way, something will emerge to steal it. Yeah. That's just how it is. Everything's clinging to that little bit of life that we have coming from our sun. I want to double back to Westworld real quick because it actually directly is related to determinism and free will. So one of the main arguments that Westworld makes as a show is the feedback loops that we are in and that we are not so different from the guests, from the hosts, right? And they make a ton of parallels to this on how we are constantly making decisions that, as we were talking about before, are kind of outside of yourself, and that you end up in these loops. So, in the show, just for people who haven't seen it, there are hosts, which are androids basically, and they have their loops. So each character has a role in the world. So in this case, it's Westworld. For the first season, it's just in this like Western place. And in that, you have, what's her name? The main character.
Yeah, Evan Rachel Wood.
Yeah.
Rachel Evan Wood.
Or something.
Wait. What?
Why am I drawing a blank?
It's not
Dora. The Explorer.
Dora the Explorer.
Dude, why am I drawing a
Westworld.
blank? I love this show and I've seen the first season like 3 times.
Oh man, I'm blanking on her name too.
I'm blanking on her name. Dude, this is going to kill me.
Dude.
But anyway, so you have each person, they have a role. So Teddy is one of the what's his name? He's one of the brothers. There's like 3 brothers, all actors. Hemsworth. He's a Hemsworth.
Oh yeah.
But how Dolores.
Dolores,
Jesus Christ.
yeah,
I didn't
yeah.
even have to look it up. All right. So anyway, so Dolores, she's the farm girl. She hangs out at the farm. She goes out, and if no one interrupts her, she goes out and paints this beautiful thing on the prairie or whatever, And so the way that the loops work is that if somebody goes in and fucks with her loop, she'll improvise with you. And she has her storyline, and you can kind of play with her storyline very much like an RPG, where you go in and if you run into a certain NPC, maybe they give you a fetch quest or whatever. So that was the premise of it. But the more you spend time in the park, the more you realize that the humans are in loops too. And everybody's in a loop. And then you start realizing everybody's got loops all the time. You have your work loop, you got your gym loop, you got your, food loop on what you cook. And, everybody's in loops all the time. And it's useful. It's useful for human beings to be in loops. It's useful for human beings to have patterns and to have things that give them stability. And, if you have something different every single day, it throws you through a loop. And that's something that I've learned with this job schedule is that it's hard for me to get into loops because I have just a different day every day. And so I would argue that one of the premises of that show is that we're all not in control of anything.
Yeah. And that sounds bad on the face of it.
It sounds bad on the face of it. And I would argue that that's not we talk about utilitarianism and like usefulness. I would argue it's just not useful to think that way.
Right.
So even if it is true, which I'm not saying it is, even if it is true, it certainly isn't helpful to do it.
Right.
It's not helpful to think that you're not in control of anything.
Yeah.
So how do you reconcile that?
I don't disagree with that. I think that's good. That's
well, how do you reconcile that though, knowing that like if you truly believe that you don't truly have control over anything, then how do you lie to yourself that you do if that's something that you've come to the conclusion of?
Yeah, it's something. It's kind of like the ego, where it's just like it's there. You're not really controlling it. It's real insofar as it's useful, but it's not really real. So you can kind of just like mindfully respond to it rather than just be yanked around by it, basically.
Okay, I'm gonna try to look up. The free will thing because I want to see if I can find this study. But I remember seeing a study where it was like if you believed that you had free will, you made literally better decisions.
Oh yeah, I've definitely seen those. There's definitely studies on that for sure.
And people, there's a lot of studies here saying that there's no such thing as free will, which is hilarious. But there was a study that literally studied the belief aspect of it, of like, well, if you believe that if you believe in free will, then you tended to make better decisions overall. You tended to be less reckless, more careful about what you're doing, whatever. And then if you're told that your decisions are not yours and that you have no free will, that you are more likely to just be an asshole, like be reckless, do selfish things, not think about the future, like whatever. And it's just because of that illusion of, well, if I don't control anything, then who cares?
But I think those are based off of factors of like the person's genetic makeup and background. They would make a decision.
Personality type for sure. But I mean, I think from that study, and I wish I could find it, but I think from that study was that.
But there's also study after study of people hooking people's brains up to neurology scans and then like asking them to press buttons and do things. And like you can see like patterns of energy in the brain firing the circuitry hundreds of milliseconds before the person thinks that they've consciously made a choice.
Yeah, but I would argue that those firings is still you making the choice. You don't need to be conscious of a decision to know that you're making it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't need to be conscious to move out of the way of a car coming at me.
Well, that's just instinctual, I think.
Yeah, but meaning like I don't need to be conscious to know that if I had time to go back in time and be conscious of it, I would have made the same fucking decision.
You would have made the same decision, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So my point is that whether I'm consciously aware of a decision or not does not take away the power that my brain did to create that decision. So I think that's where like we agree on 90% of the situation, and then I think my interpretation of what that data means means that I believe that means that is control. And you would argue that it means it's not, which is funny because we're seeing the exact same information. I think we're agreeing on the same premise.
Yeah.
But I guess from my perspective, I see that as a form of control. It's not your traditional control. It's not your typical conscious control.
Like what part of, and I'm just kind of like turned around on what part of that you control, because if especially in the situation of moving out of the way of a car.
But you in the sense that your body. You are your body and your brain.
So you can say you beat your own heart. You breathe your own breath.
Sure.
You beat your own heart?
Sure.
You're consciously beating your heart
not consciously, but I am beating it.
Okay. I mean...
because I am all of it. I'm not just my brain.
Right.
I'm the whole body. I'm everything. So whether I'm consciously doing it or not, it's still me.
Yeah.
The illusion of me. But I don't know. From my perspective, and maybe I'm just fucking straight up wrong, and people can tell me in the comments or you can email me and whatever. But from my perspective, any decision made within my system, my closed system, and this is a closed system. It's part of a larger system, but this particular thing, my body, is a closed system.
But you think that's you're identical with your body. You think that.
I believe that I am my body, yes. I believe I'm part of everything else, as if you want to zoom out even further, but as part of this smaller piece. Imagine like...
but I don't think that, when you really look at a body, especially like close up, it's all just like matter all the way down. So it's all relationships. It's all like I don't know how you can like cling on to one thing and say, this is me, this is mine, this is my identity.
I would say the amalgamation of all of the things create this self-contained system.
But it's like kind of like a storm of like always things that are just, going in and out of like consciousness and going in and out of existence. There's not like one central unchanging like self within the storm. You just are the storm.
I would argue that storm, though, is like a subsection of the larger thing. Because we're not inseparable from the universe. It's impossible to separate ourselves from the universe.
That's exactly right. That's exactly what I'm saying. There's no bright lines between anything. Between me and you and between everything else.
But I would argue, because I'm with you, but I would argue that each person is a self-contained system that is part of a larger system. So if you're trying to look on like the universal scale, no, you can't separate yourself from the space around you, right? From that standpoint.
Right.
But from the fact that we are an organism that does have a form of an identity, even like squirrels and dogs, like they might not have the ego that we do, but they do still have a concept of themselves on some level. Like I think they're aware that they're a creature in space without realizing what any of that means. You know what I mean? I don't think they have a conscious awareness of it as much as it's like they know that the paw is where it ends, like the end, and what they're touching the ground is not them. I think they know the difference between them and the outside world, even though you could argue that there's no difference between all the things.
Inner world and outer world are all one happening.
Yeah, from the standpoint of that everything's an interrelational thing. I get that. But what I'm saying is that each little sliver of consciousness, aka a human being, whatever, I would argue that is its own thing, even though it's part of the larger thing and is inseparable from everything else. It still is its own thing within the system, and that the universe designed us in this way through just physics and all, not like a conscious design, but literally just like through the happening of everything else that kind of formed us. I think the self-awareness is something that was intended. I believe that that the universe, for lack of this is starting to get into kind of the God argument, but I would argue that like the universe is like it wants us to think of ourselves as selves because that's what it wants. It wants us to think you're a human being so that you can go and evolve and have all these experiences as you, because that's unique. And every single person gets this little unique experience of life and whatever. And yeah, we're all part of the same thing. And you could argue that you and I are no different from one another because we're all part of the system and interrelations and all that. Totally with you. Agree with you on all that stuff. But meaning that I think there's a reason why we all have their own individual things.
Yeah.
And that the design of the universe wants us to all be crafting our own personal journeys and experiences throughout the whole thing. So from that standpoint, you are you and you are a self, even though if you zoom out with the big lens, it's all the same thing. Does that make sense?
A little more, yeah.
Yeah, it's not, and the thing is, this is such an impossible thing to make concrete.
Right.
That no matter what, you're talking in this fucking ethereal space of of ambiguity.
But I think that like the purpose or whatever, I just think that when you become awakened, you become awake to experience and life experiencing itself.
Mm-hmm.
There's not really, like I said, there's not really a bright line between anything. So I think that I would say that I agree. The inner world and outer world are one happening.
Yes.
They are kind of more yin and yang. They're kind of more two sides of the same thing. But they are fundamentally, it's all the same thing.
Yes.
Definitely.
So I mean, I think I agree with you on most of the stuff. I think it's just my conclusion, or how I like to think about it is just more from the standpoint of like that.
It's more like pragmatic.
Yeah.
It's more like true for me because it works and it's useful.
Yeah.
To think that
and
way.
And I would
rather
think
than not.
And I would think that like, what was the purpose of giving us a sense of self or forming a sense of self? Not even giving. Giving is probably the wrong word, but like forming a sense of self if that wasn't what was intended.
Yeah. That is an awesome question because it doesn't, even from an evolutionary perspective, it doesn't seem like something that should have evolved to help us survive.
Yes.
Because there's information processing and there's instincts and there's all of that stuff. Mm-hmm. But the fact that I'm experiencing the color of red on your shirt, there is this ineffable experience that I have over and above any information processing of like I don't know how to describe it, a thing that is experiencing that. Mm-hmm. And like I can say red or maroon or whatever, but that's just a noise. There's just like...
Yeah, we assign that word to this particular spectrum of light that reflects into our eyes and our visual cortex then reproduces that image for us based on the way that the light's reflecting off. Dude, the thinking about light, just the concept of light and how your body processes light is mind-blowing.
It is.
It's like one that is not intuitive at all. It's not intuitive to think, oh yeah, when I look at you, the fact that I see that your shirt is blue is because the only thing reflecting back at me is the blue light.
Right. So I think I'm with you, whereas like that is a kind of like staunch materialist perspective. Mm-hmm. Like there's no other like conscious experience other than information processing. And I think that those get kind of muddled.
Yeah.
I think and then I think bringing it back to psychedelics and meditation, they kind of separate those two things.
Yes. And it allows you to kind of like process that information from an outside perspective while still being inside.
Yeah. But like I would argue for things like free will and all of that stuff. Like I'm not like saying it's just mysterious. It's like the way that, or like how thoughts, like you've meditated a million times, right? Like hundreds of thousands of hours.
Oh yeah.
Like
easily.
when you're sitting there and just like being the space of awareness, thoughts just pop into existence and then they dissolve and then they pop into existence and then they dissolve. They're not solid. They're impermanent.
Neither
like
are
everything
atoms.
Else. Well, right.
Yeah.
So, but I think that like,
because don't the quarks and all the tiny parts that are within an atom, the subparticles or whatever you want to call them, those pop in and out of existence.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
All the time.
Into quantum.
So yeah, when you start getting into the quantum realm, which we don't even fully understand. So I think you'd be hard pressed to find anything solid in this universe due to the nature of everything being constantly shifting.
Right.
Like you said, it's a storm. So I think it's impossible to ever get solid on anything.
Right.
So for us to try to get a solid conclusion about anything in the universe,
even concluding that you are an actual self.
Yeah, I would say even that is hard to actually commit to because you technically can't commit to anything. But then it gets into that point of like, well, is that useful to think that way? That like you'll never know anything,
Yeah, so I
let's
definitely
just give
think
up?
that, there is pragmatism definitely has its space and stuff like that, where like it's better to, something can be true for me and not for you.
Totally.
And it's true enough to be useful, therefore it's like true.
Yes. I think there are subjective truths, and I do think that there are certain objective truths that are reproducible universally. And I think, there are certain truths that when we search deep down in ourselves, we know are true, whether we follow them or not. So like, it's pretty obvious you shouldn't take the life of somebody else, right?
Yes.
I would say objectively, most human beings coming out the womb kind of know that already.
Yeah.
You don't really need to teach them that. They just kind of know, like, I probably shouldn't kill anybody,
Yeah.
And you just kind of know that. And then, you could teach, don't do it, or you could teach, do it. And you could convince people either way.
Yeah.
But I think deep down, we all know what's wrong. We know it's wrong to like take somebody else's shit, Although you could argue though, as a child, before you have any sense of anything, with certain things you really don't know anything.
Right.
So like some kids, like they everything's mine, and then they cry if you take it from them,
Yeah.
So I think there is like some aspects of it that just when your brain's not fully developed. But I would argue that once your brain's fully developed, like what's right and wrong, but
Yeah. Well,
you can't ever get
also
somebody
psychopathology and like sociopaths and like, but those are a small, very small.
And that's
percentage.
also, I would argue, a defect.
Right.
You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like that's not a fully functioning human being. That's
totally
a fucking,
think that.
That's like a broken human being. Yeah.
Right.
And we all can be broken in some way without actually being broken.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But exactly how much credit can you take for not being a psychopath, though?
I take credit every day for not being.
Yeah, but like when you really break it down, like
yeah.
if it's something like if you don't have a broken brain, you're very neurotypical.
Sure.
Like, really, how much credit can you take for that?
I can take credit for the statistics that I was going to be born normal. You know what I mean? Yeah. No, there's not much credit you can take for that. You can't take credit for anything genetic.
Yeah.
You deal with what you deal with. Like you said, you don't choose your parents. So
right. And that's like, that's where like the concept of like not thinking that you have, free will. And I'm not 100% one way or the other. It's just a fun exercise to do.
It is.
I think that, I forgot where I was going with this. Oh yeah. You can, it can spur up a lot of empathy too. Like it basically shows you that like, there are people who are just born unlucky.
Totally.
In this world.
Yeah, just fucked from birth.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of compassion that can come from that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I mean, I would argue that, so this is where we're going to kind of get into a little bit of politics here, but I would argue that there's two different frames of mind about that. There's the let them rot, let them figure it out, fuck them, I'm not paying for them.
Conservative.
Yeah. And then there's the, we should try to find ways to help them because they can't really help themselves.
Right. I feel like that follows from the free will argument or the lack of free will argument. And a lot of people think that it doesn't or it can't. So I think that like you fundamentally see that there are some people who are just born unlucky, whether it's genetics, whether it's, stuff in society, everything is happening.
Sure.
And there are people who are just not as lucky as other people. And we should correct for that. Absolutely.
Yes. On a societal level. Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
We bear the burden of them.
Right.
We bear the burden of their suffering because they're going to act out their suffering through behaviors with other people, through interactions with other people.
Yeah.
And due to the nature of everything being interdependent and interrelated, you are going to feel the effect of that somewhere or another. 6 degrees of separation is real. So the fact that we have, loose connections with probably everybody in the world on some level, whether we just know a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy or, whatever, you're still somewhat related to them, which means the effects, the negative effects of some person and the positive effects of some person can find its way back to you. Now, it might be in a microscopic level in terms of the influence on you in a day-to-day basis, and it might be a macro level where it's just somebody close to you that their negative behavior is directly affecting you.
Yeah.
But either way, we're all affecting one another on a global scale. and on a universal scale,
For sure.
the universe is affecting all of us, through the rotation of the sun and the planets and, the galaxy itself and all the other galaxies. If you really look at it, they're all related to each other. And this is where, you could make an argument for astrology that there are some things that probably are affected by the rotation and the spins of other planets.
Yeah.
I'm a major skeptic of astrology as a whole,
Yeah.
but I think the concept of it is not ludicrous. It's not crazy to think that, being born at a certain time of day or year or whatever might actually have an effect on you. I don't know if it has an effect on you beyond that moment in that moment,
Yeah.
but, it might have an effect on you long term, and we just don't know. It's hard to calculate things with this many variables and with this much complication in the universe. Things are too complex. It's impossible to break the shit down. And because you can't break something down without the other, you're going to be never ending trying to find, as like Alan Watts puts it, is like, oh, well, this happened to me because my mother dropped me, and my mother dropped me because she's a neurotic. And, and you could just keep going for fucking ever. And then her mother was terrible and blah, blah, blah. And, so there is a point where it's like, well, you're never going to be able to define these things because it's impossible to nail down one thing. And so you can just find the relationships that make the most sense and that are closest to you. But the second you start getting farther away from that immediate vicinity, it becomes incomprehensible and potentially impossible to understand the effects that those things are going to have on you.
Yeah, definitely.
But with more data and information, maybe we can learn it, with AI and technology and all the information that we're getting from our phones and from being spied on by Google and and Amazon and everything, that information might help us find the key to the nature of the universe just by us being able to observe so many things that we just would be blind to normally, that these instruments now can record.
Think about it like that. That's cool. It's a good thought.
Right?
Yeah.
I just thought of it right now.
Yeah.
But honestly, like, why couldn't that information not help give us greater context to the larger existence of existence?
Yeah, I think more people focus on the negative, detrimental stuff, or like their privacy and all that. And which are valid concerns.
I'm very privacy conscious, and that shit does worry me.
Yeah.
But also, that's $1 trillion industry. Trillion, probably more than $1 trillion.
Bajillion.
Honestly, probably $1 bajillion, which isn't a real number. But like, think about how much power that is for somebody to know what you'll do before you do it, before you know that you'll do it. You want to talk about not having free will.
Yeah.
Your decisions are so predetermined by your preferences and all these other things, and then what's being shown to you and the ads that are pushed in your direction and all this other stuff. Who knows how many things you've been pushed to buy because of Facebook, Google, Amazon, all these people collecting data and showing you shit that you might like. How many times have you bought something that has been that?
Right.
I would venture to guess a lot of people have bought a lot of shit. Yeah. So that's $1 trillion industry because you're basically controlling the wants and the needs of the average person. That's scary. That's scary for an unregulated company to have that kind of power.
Yeah, I agree.
On everyone.
Yeah.
They know your browsing history. They know where you've been every day. Use Google Maps to track it. Boom. They got every fucking trip you've ever made.
Ugh.
Terrifying.
I use Apple Maps. And they I
drove you into a lake, right?
Yeah. Well, it's actually, so
no,
it's
not.
Gotten
better.
It used to be really, really terrible. It used to be
really bad.
But I think that they've said that they destroy the data after you end a session.
They do.
That's why I really
They do.
Apple is the only company or tech company that seems to be like really making an effort. I mean, they're not perfect. They have they've got a lot of stuff in China that is shitty. But they're generally a pretty good company.
Sure. And I would say that because their business model does not operate on selling your data.
Mm-hmm. But I think if they
don't need to.
No, but if they did, I wonder if they would flip. If that was something that they could make a ton of money off of, would they do it? Would Tim Cook do it?
Well, they already can if they wanted to.
That's true.
Right?
But they
have to change the terms of service. But
nobody will read it anyway.
Nobody will read it anyway. You just hit agree. But it's true. It's their business model operates mostly on subscriptions.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk too much about Apple, but they operate on subscriptions, iTunes, Apple Music, Netflix through the iTunes store. You know, like you can kind of pay for a lot of these things through iTunes. They get a cut of that for hosting in the app and paying your subscriptions. Then they make money off of their services. You know, they make money off of repairs, of course. Not probably take losses on repairs, but you know, but in general, like they sell hardware, they sell software, and then they sell services. None of which need to sell your data, and all of which have made them an almost $1 trillion company.
Yeah.
So they don't need to, and it would hurt their brand more to sell your data. So I think not that they wouldn't. It's a company.
Yeah.
No companies are ethical. Okay, companies are companies, and they just want to make profit. But if it wouldn't kill their brand, and they would make significantly more money, yeah, they would do it. 100%. Yeah. But they're in the space now where they don't need to, and that separates them from the other companies. Therefore, in a world where people are getting increasingly more concerned with their data and their privacy, that they're going to win out that argument every time, and they'd rather keep that position in the marketplace for now.
Right.
So we'll see. We'll see. But I'd imagine all companies will cave to that $1 trillion industry eventually.
Yeah.
And that data was something that we didn't realize how valuable it was going to be. And now here we are where we really need to start putting some legislation in that give people the power back to sell their own data. Like, yo, I should be getting a paycheck every month for my fucking data. Literally. I should be getting paid $1,000 a month. You want to talk about UBI? I should be getting $1,000 a month for my data.
Yeah.
Oh, you want to sell me products and shit, and that's a fucking gold mine? All right, I'll let you if I'm getting a cut of this shit.
Yeah.
You can't just steal my info because I use the internet. I'm not going to not use the internet.
Well, then you're kind of selling out a little bit too.
I think you should be allowed to. I think everybody should be allowed to sell their data to who they want to, and they should have control over that data profile. There's a data profile on you that is potentially millions of points of data, if not billions of points of data, that make you who you are, what you're inclined to buy, when you're about to buy something, all that stuff, right? You should control that profile, and you should get to choose who you share it with, right? I don't think there's a radical idea.
I don't think that any of it should be happening, but no, it's not a radical idea.
Yeah, I don't think it's a radical idea at all. Not too radical, Joe. Not too radical. Dude, the fucking Bernie Sanders podcast. Can we talk about that for a second?
Yeah.
Because that came on when we when we were coming down from the trip, allegedly. But so let's talk about the political climate real quick, because we have similar views, but not necessarily identical or anything.
Yeah. I think we're pretty close.
I think we're pretty close. Yeah. What did you think of Bernie Sanders on Joe Rogan, and what do you think that did for him in his campaign?
So I will admit that I didn't get to watch the entire thing. Mm-hmm. I watched maybe the first 20 minutes, 15 minutes. Okay,
it's like an hour.
So yeah, but I heard that he got a lot more momentum. What does it have? It had 6 million views the last time that I looked at it.
Yeah,
it was
somewhere
big.
in that range.
And then there was a huge push for Joe Rogan to moderate the debates.
All the debates, which is hilarious.
That would be very funny.
So here's why people wanted him to moderate the debates, is because it was an unfiltered, hour-long, potentially 2 hour, because he's had Andrew Yang on, he's had on Tulsi Gabbard, so he's had on a bunch of candidates.
Has he had any Republican candidates on?
Well, what Republican candidates? Trump.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll try to primary him, but
But he hasn't had any senators or of the Republican Party or anything like that, right?
There is somebody who wants to primary him.
Yeah.
But he's just as bad as Trump. The dude's a racist, so is this guy Joe Walsh?
Yeah, I've heard of that dude.
Yeah, and he's got some tweets that would make you be like, okay, bro.
He had Joe Walsh on?
That's dog whistling. No, he didn't. But I'm saying that that's the guy who wants to primary Trump. But no one else is trying to primary him. So, because, the Republican Party is like, well, we don't love him, but we can get him to get all of our agenda passed. So whatever.
Yeah.
But the reason why they want, Joe to host the debates, it's not because Joe's just the best reporter of all time or anything like that, because he's not. He's a comedian. But what he does do is he lets the people talk, and he'll push back on something if he feels like he knows enough about it to push back on it. And one of the things that I really enjoyed is that he gave a bunch of typical right-wing counterpoints to Bernie in a way that, not that he believed it even, that he was just well, what do you say to somebody who believes this? Yeah, right? And guess what? Bernie actually has an answer. Mm-hmm. And I think when he explained his answer about the the trade tax, where it was like 1% of all trades gets, or like, I think it was 1% of all trades, you tax that. Not that much money. And that alone, because of the sheer number of trades, especially because half these trades are fucking automated by an algorithm anyway, that alone can pay for like student loans and stuff. Yeah. So, you know, when he breaks it down like that, and he's not, you know, got some hacky MSNBC or CNN journalist that's not going to let him finish his point and not going to let him tell the whole
like
thing.
Respond to this very complicated question in 12 seconds.
Yes, exactly. And he even says that in that podcast where he's like, I don't like the debates because, you know, I'm supposed to respond to this shit in like 30 seconds.
Yeah, how do you
45
solve
seconds.
healthcare in 10 seconds?
Good luck. Yeah, you can't. And so I think people are fiending for that kind of thing where, like, I'm sorry, but it's, you know, theater. It's like political theater when you watch the debates. It's a joke because no one's really getting a good answer, and it's all about the gotcha moments. And you know what's hilarious is Bernie still got those gotcha moments without even planning them. You know, I wrote the damn bill. Like, I fucking loved that quote because it was like, yeah, he does know what's in it. Right. You're an idiot. You should have done your research before you said a comment like that. Yeah. But then again, you know, Tim Ryan and all of those people, complete hacks. They're useful idiots that for the establishment, you know. And I think the reason why the people who are most popular right now in the campaign, Biden is popular purely based on the idea 30330. Yeah. So if you guys haven't seen that video, it's fucking hilarious.
Senility.
Yeah.
He's getting pretty senile.
Dude, there's a bunch of videos of him now getting senile. And did you see that his blood, like his eye bled during the climate hall? Yeah, the climate town hall. It was like literally he looked terrible. He couldn't answer a single question properly. He didn't have the facts. It just looked bad. So the only reason why he's popular is literally from just the, oh yeah, I like Obama. He was his VP, right? Yeah, fuck it, I'll vote for him. Like, they don't really know. These are people who are not that keen in or paying attention. But then for the people who are paying attention, the most popular candidates are who? Bernie and Elizabeth Warren. And why? So Bernie, because he says what he means. He said the same shit for fucking 40 years. And you can tell he believes in what he's saying. He's not saying it to be politically convenient. Some of his answers are not the most politically convenient answers, but they're the ones that are the most thoughtful and are giving real attention.
He's been a democratic socialist from forever.
From day one. Yeah. And his whole platform is not radical at all. It's literally the same platform that FDR had, and that they tried to kill that momentum. You know, back, you know, the establishment, meaning the establishment tried to kill the momentum back in the day because, you know, they're not profiting in that scenario. The regular people were, but like, they're not going to. So he's popular. Elizabeth Warren is popular because she uses that same rhetoric. I don't believe she has the same convictions at all. Yeah. I don't believe that she truly will fight for half of these things. I think she'll fight for some of them. Some of them I think she genuinely is very passionate about and won't cave on. But I think there's plenty of them that she'll just, I'll play ball. Like, she's not really going to fight for Medicare for all. Right. She's not going to. She might, like, if it works and she's got enough momentum that she could do it, like, yeah, she'll do it.
She's pretty serious about the student loan.
She's serious about student loan, which is good. I'll take it, you know. And if it came down to it and I had to vote for her, I would, you know. But if you elect Joe Biden, if the establishment forces Joe Biden as the candidate, dude,
don't tell me you're not going to vote. Please don't.
I don't think I would, man.
Really?
I don't think I'd vote for him. I couldn't.
Well, who would you vote for?
I mean, I'm not voting for Trump, so I don't know.
But I feel like not voting is a vote for Trump. That's like the whole people who didn't vote in the Hillary Trump election.
I mean, I voted for Jill.
Yeah, but that's.
But here's the thing. I know, and people are gonna hate me for admitting that.
Literally anybody is better than what we have. Even Joe Biden.
He's really not that much better, but okay. But like, so here,
as far as policy, or as far
as policy, because the reason why is because Joe Biden has been wrong on every single issue ever for the history of his whole political career. He's been wrong literally every single time. Every single like major issue, if you look at his votes, he's on the wrong side of history. Segregation,
he got the whole busing thing.
Yes,
he was against busing.
Yes, he was against busing. He was against. So he was for the crime bill, which ended up basically just punishing poor Black and Latino communities. Yeah. You know, he voted for the Iraq War. I mean, he voted for, I forgot what, there was like some bill in the finance world that was basically great for bankers, bad for regular people. He voted for that. Like, there's so many different things that I could just list to you endlessly that he might as well be a Republican. And so he would be a more competent Republican, basically. That's what I see him as. Yeah. And maybe on social issues, he's fucking fine. But even that, he was not on because of segregation.
But if he's fine on social issues right now, I would take it over what we have.
I would take it over what we have, but I wouldn't vote for it.
I think, so I'm going to say Joe Biden is more coherent than Trump.
Barely.
I think.
Barely.
But that's still,
barely.
So like...
Trump is such a low bar that everyone's more competent.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Like,
no, I know, like, that's fair.
He is so empty of content when he says, he bullshits to an unreasonable degree.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's just in the room at the moment, and even then, he's barely there.
It's shocking.
Yeah. And in fact, his brain is deteriorated dramatically. Yeah. And if you actually watch him speaking now compared to when he was like campaigning for presidency, you can see the decline. But the same thing is happening with Joe Biden. And that's my point, is that Joe Biden's mind is also really going really fast. Yeah. And the more videos I see, the 3-0, like that is like just the tip of the iceberg with all the gaffes that he's had. Yeah. And so if you put him again, if like the establishment wants to put another Hillary Clinton 2.0, and I would argue he's actually worse than Hillary Clinton. Like, I honestly do think he's worse than Hillary Clinton, and Hillary Clinton didn't get elected. Okay. So if Biden's worse and they want to push him forward, then my response to the establishment is fuck you. That's my response to the establishment. So if they cheat Bernie out of this again, or they even cheat Elizabeth Warren, who is arguably still an establishment candidate, but albeit the most liberal establishment candidate, even more liberal than Obama, who was not liberal at all, by the way. But like, if they fuck either one of them out of it, when the will of the people is clearly, the momentum, the actual support is clearly in those two camps, which, by the way, the constitution of each like political candidate is very interesting how it breaks down. So with Elizabeth Warren, her candidacy is like very white. The people that like her, very white, very educated. No, really, literally. When you do the breakdown, very white, very college educated. Yeah. That's her people. Okay. Bernie is a little bit more diverse. Bernie's got kind of the regular, the poor, the downtrodden. He's got those people, and he definitely has college educated people too. But it's not super white. He's actually got a pretty diverse following. And I would argue that the winning ticket is both of them. Make one president, one VP. Yeah. And if they don't do that, they're fucking stupid. Yeah. Because you got two 20%ers right now, right? It's a three-way tie of like 20% for Biden, which again is falling and keeps falling and is going to continue to fall. Then you have Warren and Sanders that are both at like 20%, 17, 18%, right? In terms of the polling right now. So you got two people polling at solid percentage, and their brain isn't going. Bernie's old, but his brain is sharp as fuck. Yeah, honestly, he's sharper this time around than he ever was before. Right. So you can't make that argument with him. I've heard people that we used to work with, I've heard them say, oh, well, Bernie's too old. I'm like... I remember hearing that too. I don't think... That's a stupid argument because Biden's too old.
Is Biden younger than him?
By a year, maybe. I don't know. I don't even think he's that much younger than him. I think he's like the same age. So, and Biden looks worse to me than Sanders does. So my argument is that if you want a winning ticket, you really needed to just combine Warren and Sanders. And that's a compromise between the establishment and the true progressives, right? Mm-hmm. And I think people will be happy with that ticket. Yeah. No matter how you flip it. No matter who you want to make the presidential candidate, who you make the VP. So if Warren wins the candidacy, the worst thing they could do is be like, yeah, fuck Bernie. Because Bernie's the guy, he's the only one who actually has real momentum. Ooh, shit. That only has like real momentum on his side, right? We're talking like the only one who actually is grassroots people. He's got the most donations out of any candidate. That's where the support is. So like it or not, the people matter. You know, the politicians want to pretend like it's the people's fault for not voting for them. And it's like, no, it isn't. It's your fault for not being good enough to be worth voting for. Mm-hmm. You know, and if people see somebody that they believe in, then they're going to go vote for them. They will. Like I would be there on day one to vote. If I knew I was able to vote for Bernie over Trump, dude, it would be like, I would run in there happy and like, yeah,
but if
we're
about to
Biden,
kill it.
If it was Biden, I'd be like, dude, fuck this guy. Yeah, literally. I know, and I know I'm going to get flack for that.
The difference between Biden and Trump, Biden, I don't think is a malignantly petty, racist, horrible person.
No, he's not. He's not. On that level, he's not.
Right,
But policy-wise, he's going to be slightly better, but still kind of bad. And he's not good for the environment either. His opinion on environmental stuff is he doesn't really believe in global warming either. If you actually look at what he does.
Vote for slightly better policy and better person.
I would just let other people vote for that guy.
That's what happened with Hillary and Trump.
Exactly, which is why I'm saying don't put him up. Establishment, if you're listening, which I know you're not, don't put him up because he will lose. He will lose. Mark my words, he will lose. If you put Biden up, he will lose. 100%. No doubt about it, he will not win. And the reason why is because he continues to tank. He continues to tank, dude. His support, the more he talks, the more he falls. Yeah. And the funny part is his campaign staff, literally their strategy is as little exposure as possible. How well did that work for Hillary? Because her staff had the same situation.
I'm still mad at CNN for blocking out Bernie.
Dude,
they were so biased towards Hillary.
Dude, they literally showed an empty podium for Trump while Bernie talked to 30,000 people.
It's fucking infuriating.
At the same time. Literally, they showed for 30 minutes an empty podium while Bernie was talking to a rally of 30,000 people. So again, momentum. You got to think about where is the support? Where are the regular people? I don't care what some fucking analyst on MSNBC or CNN's opinion is, because these motherfuckers are rich. They've hung out with nothing but rich people, and they get the echo chamber of rich people, which guess what? Are not in favor of the shit that's going to help regular people. Why? Because the current system's really helping rich people right now.
For sure.
So everybody on TV, all those people, in order to get into the media world, guess how you do it? You have rich parents, and you can afford to live in New York on $12 an hour.
Right.
No one else can. A poor person can't do that. I can tell you that right now. You're not working your way up in the media world if you're poor and you got to live in a major city. You're just not going to do it because they're not going to pay you enough money to live off of. But if you got a rich parent, you can afford it.
Man.
So my point is, and I'm going to get a lot of flack for this podcast because of this shit, but it's what I believe and this is what I stand for, because I just don't believe that we can just continue. Like, the establishment thinks that you can just keep continuing to just fuck the people and we'll just give them crumbs and they'll just have to deal with it. No, we've hit the point. The fact that Trump got elected should be our wake-up call. We can't keep doing that because you're going to end in complete chaos. We're going to end in civil unrest. We're going to have people rioting in the streets if we don't fucking do something about it. And the only way to do something about it is to actually start putting people in power that will make certain changes that will actually better the lives of people.
But I think you should make smart decisions on the way to doing that.
Sure. And the smart decision is don't put Biden as the candidate.
I don't disagree with anything that
you
said.
No superdelegates should be putting their vote towards Biden. Put it towards Warren. If you really want an establishment candidate and you really are just opposed to fundamental change in the system that's fundamentally broken, which is why we got Trump in the first place, then whatever, man. But then put up Warren, because she's got a better chance. I'd actually vote for her, even though I don't think, she's not Bernie Sanders, and I hate that people keep saying, oh, but she's basically Bernie. No, she isn't. And when you break it down by policy, she's really not, at all. But she is the best establishment candidate I've ever seen in terms of, still clearly being part of the in-party, but willing to give more bones to the regular people, for sure.
Yeah.
But we don't need that. What we need is fundamental, radical change in this country of certain elements. It's not, you don't have to change the whole system to fix some of the major broken parts. You just have to fix those major broken parts. And one of them's healthcare. And I've said this 1,000 times in this podcast.
Yeah,
but
we talked about that last time.
Yeah, healthcare is just the number one thing.
That's a no-brainer.
It's a no-brainer.
I feel like that's a no-brainer.
Literally a no-brainer. And then the other one is going to be, to me, is going to be properly taxing corporations and the rich.
For sure.
That doesn't cover. I'm not one of those people who's like, oh, yeah, if you just do that, that covers all of our bills. No, but it does start making the flow of money, the velocity of money, as an economist would say, more in the direction of people spending money. Because right now, nobody has any money to spend.
Where are you on universal basic income?
So I don't love Andrew Yang's version of it. However, I am in favor of the concept of it.
Yeah, I'm open-minded to it.
Yeah. Definitely. I think it's foolish to think that you only do UBI and you just get rid of every other program.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the way to do it.
automation is going to changed so many jobs, drivers,
Yes.
truck drivers,
Yes.
everything. Almost everything that you can do can be automated. So like whatever, I mean, if we get to the point where we can have self-driving trucks, that's going to hundreds of thousands of people are
Yes.
going to be without
Millions,
jobs.
actually. Millions of people are drivers.
Yeah.
So in America, I think it's less than 10 million, but it's several million people are drivers of some kind.
Right.
Truck drivers, fucking Uber, whatever. And in fact, now that I think about it, in Chicago alone, there's like 1 million Uber drivers or something like that, like literally. So the fact that there's that many, or maybe it's 500,000 or something like that. So the fact that there's that many in just one city, and then you think about it on the whole scale, if you were to automate driving, I mean, that is going to eliminate a lot of jobs and a lot of ways that people make money. Now, I would argue that just because something's a job doesn't mean it's a worthy thing of human beings' time. I mean, if there's certain things that we can automate, I'm in favor of that. But then you got to think about the effects that you're having on the people who now that was the only thing that they were good enough for.
Yeah, I feel like in UBI is the intent is to correct for that.
Yes. And that UBI needs to be generated from a severe tax on the automation of those things. Yeah. We need to tax the companies in the way that it's fine if it's still cheaper for them to automate it, but you need to then get some of that money to be able to put it back towards the people that you just stopped giving a job for and stopped giving them a paycheck. And it's hard because I don't know how we account for all of these things when there's so many other things that are fundamentally broken about the system that when you add automation on top of it, it's just like how the fuck are we going to fix this? Because the fundamental things that are causing 90% of wealth generated to go to only the top 1%, I don't know how you correct that. On top of the fact that you are now losing jobs and people are losing things that they were skilled for, and then they're not skilled to go do some other job, and you're not going to just retrain them. Truck driver's not going to just become an AI scientist, dude. Yeah. It's just not how that works.
Most of those people are, so I think Andrew Yang's running point is that they're mostly in their average age is about 40, and most of them are just high school education.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. And so what are you supposed to do for them?
Yeah.
Not fuck them, okay? Like we got to be compassionate here, and somebody who's like probably sitting and listening to this who already hates me for saying that I wouldn't vote for Biden, but like, somebody's sitting there listening and they're thinking, what? I'll be fine, right? My job's not getting automated. Wrong.
Yeah.
Wrong. Because the thing is there are jobs that are in like, so like for lawyers and stuff, they can automate discovery. Well, think about all the fucking man hours spent looking through papers and all the shit that you could just run through a fucking scanner, finds exactly what you're looking for. And what, there's things like that are high level jobs that, I mean, you're doing some menial work in that high level job.
Yeah.
And then, the thing that you're really getting paid for is like your interpretation of the law and your ability to come up with all these angles and whatever. That's its own thing, the human ingenuity part of it. But there are parts of that job that now are going to be gone. And the same thing with the medical field.
Yeah.
Think about how many things are being automated in the medical field.
Definitely. And they're doing it faster and without an error, with a lot less errors.
A lot less errors.
Yeah.
So, when you think about all of those things, you got a lot of moving parts going on in this universe here, a lot of moving parts going on in this country, and a lot of moving parts going on in the globe, because of globalism and the global trade and the interdependence of all these nations at this point now financially, where, it's amazing that we're in all these wars that we're in because of a lot of them. It's just there's a lot of disincentivized ways to avoid war, because it's like, well, we have this economic relationship with them and we're making this much money. And if we get in a war with them, then we're not making this money. And, there's a lot of reasons now that we've like made it where it's not profitable to be in a war. And yet we still find ourselves in these wars because it's profitable for some people to be in wars. But as a society, it's not profitable for us to be in a war at all.
No.
We always have money for that. We always have money to drop bombs. We never have money to like build our own roads or to help students. Like the second you start talking about student loans, whatever, well, how are you going to pay for that? Well, how do we just green light another $40 billion for the military?
How did we bail out Wall Street whenever that happened?
Yes, we bailed out Wall Street. No one went to jail. I talked about this in my last solo podcast, which I have not released as of today, but I'm going to try to release it tomorrow. But like I literally talk about that. I'm like, no one went to jail, dude. And if this was a movie,
Yeah.
you would be like, oh fuck these motherfuckers,
Yeah.
let's kill them.
They did make a movie. It's called The Big Short.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But you know what I'm saying. Like the premise is that if you were to just see this from the outside and not think about it as your own country, but just watching it as like a movie or some other outside thing, you'd be looking at that like, oh yeah, they should go to jail. Yeah. And they didn't, and no one did. And guess what they got? They got bonuses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really it's fucked.
It's fucked. And this is something that we actually talked about on our trip.
We talked about on the most recent one.
Yeah.
We talked about how we would structure society, different like problems that would need to happen if we implemented all of the stuff, or not problems that needed to happen, but like problems that would arise and solutions for them. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a good conversation.
It was a good conversation. Yeah. And this one has been too, man. I didn't mean to monopolize the political part here.
It's okay.
But yeah, I know it's been a little bit, so I'll probably call it here.
Oop.
But this has been a lot of fun, man.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. And
happy to come back. We didn't get into my most recent trip, which we can do, because I actually wanted to have a few more under my belt anyway before coming back. So maybe after a few.
Yeah,
yeah.
Maybe maybe a little journey into some special spaces, some interesting hyperspace dimension.
Yeah.
Cool. So Daniel, thanks again for coming on, man. I appreciate it.
And
thanks for pushing back, because you got to push back on me on the stuff. I know I'm a radical when it comes to
I don't think you're that radical.
I'm not actually radical in what I believe in, but I am radical in my conviction, where no, I'm not going to take another milquetoast liberal. I'm not going to take another establishment neoliberal shill candidate. Like, I'm just not going to take that. And I think too many people are still willing to accept that when they've seen that the result of that and those policies was Trump. That's the result. The result of Obama not being actually liberal and mostly continuing Bush's policies and codifying them and solidifying them has caused people to then vote for Trump, because they're like, well, fuck, that didn't work. So I'm still suffering here in this city, and I'm still, my factory just closed and all this other stuff. And so they're thinking, and Trump's not their savior. Trump's not actually going to fix their problems, but he seemed like something different to them, And too many people want to just throw it under, well, Hillary was a woman, so they didn't want to vote for her because of a woman. I'm like, maybe like fucking 5% of voters, that's their thing. But I don't put Elizabeth Warren there and tell me the same thing happens. It's not going to, because she's not as bad of a candidate. Right. So I guess for me, I think they want the easy explanation. They're just all racist. They're just all misogynist. They're just all this. That's not it. Yeah. That's not it. And everyone who is a racist and a misogynist, of course, they're all going to be on Trump's side. But that's not that big of a percentage of the country. I really don't think it is.
Really?
And I think the majority of people hate Trump, but they didn't vote. And why didn't they vote? Because you put up a candidate that kind of sucked and made them not super motivated to go vote. But if you put up a candidate like Bernie and they start hearing his platform, he's one of the candidates where the more he talks, the more he's liked.
Yeah.
You can't say that about Biden. The more he talks, the more he's not liked.
He gets laughed at.
He literally gets laughed at. He fucking bled from his eye from the climate town hall.
That one.
Dude, it's bad. And like, he also did terrible in the town hall. So listen to his answers compared to like Elizabeth Warren did great.
Yeah.
And Bernie obviously did awesome. I mean, come on, that's his platform, Yeah. So you just got to pay attention to those things. And anybody who's really paying attention, don't just go with it seems like that's a safe bet, so I'll go with it. Like, no, that's the wrong thinking. You're already thinking wrong. And you're also already being programmed by the fucking television, where they're telling you which candidate they want you to vote for. They tried to push Pete Buttigieg on everybody. I'm like, well, luckily that didn't fucking work. And he's got like 2% support, or 4% or whatever. He's not going to make it. It's a three-way tie at this point. And mark my words, I'm fucking calling it right now. It's going to be between Biden, Warren, and Sanders. And in my opinion, it's really between Sanders and Warren. I don't think Biden actually has the legs to continue to go. And I hope that it continues to tank so that people realize he's not the most electable, because when you actually look at most electability, it really looks better for Sanders and Warren in terms of that.
Yeah.
And I would argue that they're a super team if they're together.
Yeah, I think that'd be a dream team.
Yeah, and that's the thing. If you ask any liberal, hey, what would be would you be cool with Sanders and Warren? It's like all the people who are like, oh, Bernie's too old. They'd be like, well, at least Warren's there. You know what I mean? Like, so you can get the people, because they don't actually overlap. And that was something that I thought was really interesting before we fully wrap this up, was that the difference between the candidates, how I said, like very white, very college educated, that's Warren. If they said that their candidate was out, if Warren was out, they said that they would go to Kamala
Harris?
Yes. And then if Bernie was out, they'd go to Biden or something. I forgot what it was, but it was like you'd be surprised at who they diverted to. Yeah. Where it was like, oh, I mean, there's overlap between them, but there's more differences than you'd realize in terms of who each one appeals to, which is why them together covers the whole gambit. You know, you get the conviction of Bernie and the movement of Bernie, and then you can get the policy wonk and the super educated people and the people who want to try to protect some elements of the status quo that would vote for Warren.
Yeah.
You know, I think you get the best of both worlds. So the Democratic Party would be really stupid to not team them up together.
Yeah.
But just know that the Democratic Party hates Bernie. And so the only way they would ever do that is if Bernie won the nomination against all odds and against their rigging. And then they're like, well, please give us Warren. And then he would take Warren.
But I feel like he won. Basically, he had like the popular vote. Like Bernie was the one that people wanted when it was between him and Hillary.
Yes, of course it was.
The Democratic Party thought that Hillary should have gotten it, so she got it.
Yes, they anointed her before any votes were ever cast. Yeah, but luckily they didn't get rid of superdelegates, but they've at least made it so that they can't put in their votes yet to skew because the thing is if people believe a candidate's going to win, then they just go with it. They're like, I'm not going to fight that. They think that they're going to win. Whatever. You know, and that's a stupid way of thinking, but that is how people vote. You know, so they want to be in the in crowd. You know, oh, I want to be on the team that knew who was going to win, so I'm going to just go with the people who all think it's going to win. You know.
Yeah.
And as we learned from the last one, we didn't know shit. Cool. Well, sorry to all the liberals who are really mad at me right now for saying I wouldn't vote for Biden. But as long as the establishment is smart and doesn't keep propping up his campaign and realizes that he won't win, then we shouldn't have any problems, guys.
Okay. We'll have another podcast after the election.
After the election, yeah, we'll talk about it. Talk about it. Okay, cool. Thanks, Daniel. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Peace.